Welcome, everyone, to Connected Learning TV. This is the 34th webinar in our series, and so far our webinar content has been viewed in over 95 countries, and we've really enjoyed seeing such a diverse community develop over these past several months. To those watching on live stream, we encourage you to use the chat stream to introduce yourselves, connect with each other, share resources, and pose questions for those here in the Google Plus Hangout. The URL for our public group notes Google Doc for today should be included in the live stream chat, and we'd like your assistance in capturing highlights and sharing resources related to today's topic of how we can move forward and toward a vision of education and learning that is beneficial to everyone involved in schools today. Before our guest speakers take the floor to help frame today's conversation, I wanted to give everyone here in the Hangout a chance to briefly introduce themselves. And why don't you start us, Laurel?
Thank you, Craig. My name is Laurel Feld. I am a doctoral candidate here at the USC Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism. I study play and playful participatory learning, exemplified by the cat in the hat that I've donned, encouraged by my colleague, Erin Reilly, who began with the crown and kicked us off. I'm also very interested in instructional design and have worked on that in multiple contexts, including with the Participatory Learning and U Group, the Joint Educational Project, the USC Shoah Foundation, and other nonprofits.
Right.
Thanks, Craig.
The two Sarahs?
Thanks. My name is Sarah Kern, and I'm here with Sarah Morriso, and we both work on the Vital Signs program, which is a science community of practice between teachers, students, and scientists all across the state of Maine. And we work for the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, which is a not-for-profit that's based in Portland, Maine.
Okay, so thanks everyone, and today we're extremely honored to be joined by Erin Reilly and Ioana Literat of the USC Annenberg Innovation Lab. Erin is the creative director for Annenberg Innovation Lab. Her research focus is children, youth, and media, and the interdisciplinary creative learning experiences that occur through social and cultural participation with emergent technologies. Ioana is a researcher for Project New Media Literacies and the Audience Engagement Group at the Annenberg Innovation Lab. She is currently exploring the educational, cultural, and transnational aspects of digital participation. Today they will be sharing some key and what I think are really important and kind of breakthrough takeaways from a new research and media-rich publication that's just come out, titled Designing with Teachers, Participatory Approaches to Professional Development in Education. So Erin and Ioana, how about you take it away?
Great, thanks, Craig. We actually received one of the working group grants to put together a working group around participatory learning and professional development. So what are participatory models of professional development? And this group was very diverse. It was made up of both researchers, practitioners, and teachers in the field. And when we mean practitioners, we mean actually outside informal learning educators who are working both in and out of schools. And this working group all was encouraged to think about participatory learning culture in their communities. So Ioana, why don't we bring up the presentation and I'll kind of review a little bit about what participatory learning is and the characteristics that we've identified in the Play Research Group here at the Innovation Lab, and then we'll get started. Okay, great. So sharing, there we go. So, and we can go to, yeah. So, so participatory learning is very complementary to connected learning, as Craig and I have talked about in the past. How we see it is it offers opportunities to explore knowledge across domains and apply knowledge in a variety of situations relevant to the learner. So in a participatory learning environment, one of the key attributes is play, which we define as the ability to experiment with our surroundings as a form of problem solving. And it's also really important to learn from each other. We all are encouraged to share in an in a knowledge exchange, whether it's a teacher, a student, an administrator, a parent, a community partner. All of them are part of the learning process. So learning in a participatory learning environment becomes about negotiation and collaboration between all of these participants that I just actually mentioned. And it values different perspectives, and each perspective and participant is respected in this space. We feel that these environments are really stimulating, and they force each learner to really think hard about her statements and the way arguments are formed, to really encourage critical inquiry. And it's often comprised of several activities, such as like pursuing our interests, as interest-based networks are becoming more and more important in the learning environment. It helps to face challenges, ask questions, exchange feedback, develop our passions, which, as you can see, here's one of mine. It also is about building relationships and establishing identities as we often move from one community to the next. And you'll hear about a variety of communities that were represented in this publication. And we have multiple identities. So how do we actually negotiate those identities? And I would say the last thing is that each one of these really is constructing products, that there's some sort of making and doing in a participatory learning environment. And it's not about the end product, but actually about the process and how learning emerges through making. So getting to know educators' needs and backgrounds is really pivotal to meeting them where they are. And earning trust helps ensure that participants' full investment is there and is maintained, and that we really create an open community. So what you're seeing here on this screen is what PLAY, our research group at the Innovation Lab, has identified as 5 principles of participatory learning. And the first one I want to is at the left, and I'll kind of go around, is about participants having a chance to exercise creativity through diverse media tools and practices. We think it's really important for creative thinkers to exhibit some combination of the following traits: purpose, passion, devotion, driving absorption, and persistence. And as educators, we really need to provide spaces for young people to tinker and experiment and understand that failure is part of the process. Not that we want people to fail as like in a noun, but it's actually a verb. It happens and we continue on. So we feel that this type of iterative process is part of the really fostering creative thinking skills. And when it comes to technology, which you can see it's part of this step, it's not all of it, but it does say tools. We hope with a creative mindset, people start asking, what else can we use this for? Or who else may be empowered to use these tools? So let's think about co-learning. Co-learning is about pooling our knowledge together towards a common goal. And Paulo Freire has been talking about this since the 70s, and we are a big believer of Paulo Freire. I hope I'm saying his name right and not butchering it. But he talked about the transition from the banking concept of education to a more dynamic where the teacher is no longer merely the one who teaches, but instead he or she is taught in dialogue with his or her students, and that each one of them can learn and teach and learn from each other. And this is really a shift in the expert paradigm that many of us as part of the digital media and learning community are talking about. And this new knowledge, when we shift the expert paradigm, really helps to produce more meaningful transactions in a shared classroom. Now, the third one is about motivation and engagement. And educational researchers propose that engagement is multidimensional, which really includes behavioral engagement, so thinking about how we actively perform learning activities. It also includes cognitive engagement, thinking about how we foster deeper learning, and effective engagement, the expressive enjoyment. You know, how do we enjoy and are passionate about the learning we're participating in? Schools have traditionally relied on systems of extrinsic motivation, such as grades. And what we believe is that it really means that, you know, it's forcing people to think about what they're working on. And what we want to shift to is what's happening in the informal learning activities that are outside of the school. that is more about really dependent on participants' emotional connection with the task to carry through the learning process because they're driven by their passions. And this, in turn, offers agency in their learning, where both teachers and students can really start personalizing their learning and making it more relevant to who they are. So as you can see, I used relevant. It goes right into the next principle of participatory learning. How many of you have probably heard this of like a student saying, why am I learning this? Or, who cares? I have been in classrooms where students have actually said that. And it's about the importance of really looking at individual attitude issues with what they're learning about. And it signals that sometimes curriculum may be disconnected to where the students are and what their realities are. So relevance is about encouraging students to connect to their cultural and geographical worlds. So thinking about worlds, we've added the last principle, which is about the learning ecosystem. And the learning ecosystem forges rich connections between home, school, community, the world. This term, learning ecosystem, is about a network of people as much as it is places or practices or processes that support learning across their lifetime. So learning is about learning happening anywhere and everywhere from anyone and everyone. And as you think about leveraging the internet as a resource for teachers and students to learn, we really need to think about how we create a blended learning experience that offers hybridity for teachers and students to move and be challenged within their neighborhood of both people as mentors outside of the schools, as well as the places that they're located in. So hyperlocality in a participatory learning environment becomes more and more important. So that's a little overview of how we see participatory learning and what we in the working group had discussed and shared. And I'm going to pass this over to Ioana, who's going to tell you about kind of the genesis of what our overarching goal and objective was. Ioana?
Sure. So thinking about participatory learning, it's also very important to acknowledge what we call the participation gap, which goes beyond the digital divide and refers to the unequal access to the skills and opportunities needed in the 21st century, and how the lack of access to these skills can prevent young people from meaningful participation in these social cultural environments. But although we usually talk about the participation gap in relation to students, it's crucial to acknowledge that it applies just as much to teachers as well. And if teachers themselves are not afforded these opportunities to grow and to learn, then the participation gap is consequently passed on to the students as well. And it will be hard for them to teach in a participatory learning pedagogy when they themselves are not afforded these opportunities. So the idea of this working group came out of discussions at the 2011 Digital Media and Learning Conference, when we realized that these conversations about how we can engage teachers in participatory, in professional development, and how we can extend opportunities for participatory learning for educators as well, we realized that all these conversations are happening in silo, and that even though a lot of people in the digital and media field are concerned about these issues, there was very little dialogue between these various factions. So what we wanted with this working group is to bring together all the people that are designing and implementing professional development programs for teachers and offer a forum, a collaborative and diverse interdisciplinary forum for them to have these conversations. So the goals of the working group, as we see them, were to, first of all, provide a common forum for PD conversations centered around participatory learning, because this was really the core of what we were doing in the working group, is trying to think of how we can make the PD process more participatory. Then we also wanted to foster interdisciplinary dialogue identify synergy among members so that they can learn from each other and grow as a result of these dialogues. Come up with a common framework for participatory models of PD, which Erin and I will outline in a second. And our framework includes what we call values and design principles of participatory PD. Also, we wanted to extract best practices and also challenges in the field, and we were interested what researchers and practitioners from these various disciplines and various schools and various states had to say about best practices and challenges and how this differed between these various contexts. And finally, we wanted to build a collection of case studies that would exemplify these best practices. And we wanted to share them with this larger community so that they can be the start of an important conversation. And this collection of case studies became the publication that Craig was talking about previously. In terms of the scope of discussions that we had within this working group, they were centered around, I would say, 6 different questions or larger areas of inquiry. We wondered, in terms of goals, what do teachers want from a PD experience as opposed to what is required of them? What are or what should be the goals of PD? For participatory learning, we wanted to find out what is the current role of teachers, first of all, in the PD design process, and then how can we make this process more participatory and more engaging so that it recognizes ownership and co-design and relevance. And this is what inspired the title to this publication too, because it was really a transition from PD for to PD with. In terms of context and relevance, we were interested in how do we properly account for various disciplines and different age groups when crafting versatile PD programs, and how can we reconcile specific and very relevant PD programs with the common core standards and requirements that all teachers have to fulfill. In terms of media, we wondered what is the role of media and digital technologies in PD. So as you'll see, a lot of the case studies are explicitly address the integration of media and digital technologies within professional development programs. We also talked a lot about sustainability and how can we create an environment which sustains ongoing learning that teachers themselves can direct. How can we make PD programs more sustainable? And finally, as I'm sure Dan Hickey will elaborate on this later on, we discussed assessment at length and how to best assess professional development initiatives in a way that is specific and relevant to the particular programs, and also in a way that recognizes teacher investment in assessment and not only in teaching. So inspired by Barry Fishman's work on design-based research, we came up with this framework that suggests 2 levels of consideration in crafting participatory models of professional development. The first level is the grander level of values or meta principles, and the second level is design principles. And we will talk about these in a second. So I will start by talking about the meta principles or the values that can help shape participatory professional development. And as you can see, we crafted these as a set of positive and negative. So it is this but not this. It is participation but not indoctrination. exploration, not prescription, contextualization, not abstraction, and finally iteration, not repetition. And very briefly, I will go over each of these, but you can find out more about them by reading about them in our publication. So for participation, as I have mentioned before, it was really our core interest in bringing this group together, and we believe that one of the core values of participatory PD is this need to transition from PD4 to PD with. So this first value refers to the need to engage teachers in crafting these programs and to recognize their investment in the process. Secondly, we believe that in order to inspire the sense of ownership and co-design in the teachers, PD program should allow ample room for personal and professional exploration. Because when the educators have an opportunity to explore, they connect differently to the content and are able to display their own individuality in the process, which we believe is crucial in having them as co-designers of the PD program. Thirdly, contextualization, not abstraction, refers to the tension between the desire to create scalable and flexible initiatives, but also the need to cater most effectively to specific disciplines and specific levels and ages of instruction. And we believe that there is a way to reconcile this tension by addressing the common core standards that teachers need to fulfill, but in the same time being very flexible in the design of PD programs. And finally, we call the fourth principle iteration, not repetition, because we believe that in order to sustain ongoing and improved learning, the design of successful PD programs should include specific opportunities for improvement and troubleshooting and evaluation. And this is where assessment will play a vital role. And as we mentioned in the publication, we do hope that assessment practices in the realm of PD will increasingly reflect the participatory change or participatory trend in program design. And now we would be honored to present the case studies, the 6 case studies that made up the main part of our paper, and we're very privileged to have a few of the authors here, and they will have a few minutes to describe their work and to expand a bit on the relevance of their work to participatory models of professional development. Is Dan here? He's not here yet.
Actually, Dan is Wi-Fi in the airport is not working, so he won't be able to join us today. But I guess I can say a few words. I've been working with Dan kind of in cooperation over the past couple of years, both when we were at MIT and now at USC. So I've seen his participatory assessment models that he's been developing really progress and transition and change and become very much a very good practitioner language for teachers to understand what participatory assessment is. So this digital is a project that Dan Hickey and his PhD student Rebecca Ito worked on. This case study really describes like the current and future efforts to help teachers embrace participatory approaches to learning. And in their case study, which I really encourage you to read, they discuss really an ongoing collaboration between assessment researchers, such as Dan and Rebecca, who are learning scientists, curriculum developers, and also high school English teachers. And their whole focus is around situated learning, so really about very much kind of referencing what I talked about earlier, the importance of looking at your local community and situating the learning within that space. They're inspired also on connectivist instruction, participatory assessment, and design-based research. So in their case study, the essential elements is really to expand on participatory learning and offer a model on how to assess the participation through the entire learning process instead of just the end product. And it goes from kind of like, I would say, sparks as you're developing activities, how you can currently kind of assess each activity as it's in process and not just think about assessing the end product or at the end when you're doing like kind of an evaluation. But how do you let the students and teachers work together to assess each other and in a kind of a cooperative way? Now, I'm not doing it as much justice as the case study says, so I'll leave it with go read the case study.
Okay, so moving on to vital signs.
Great, thank you. So Vital Signs is an online community of students, educators, and scientists and citizen scientists that's focused on studying native species and invasive species in the state of Maine. And it's a learning community that shares a lot in common with the participatory learning model that Erin presented earlier. So from the start, when we were developing Vital Signs, we actually brought teachers and scientists and students into the development process because we knew if we actually included them as we were designing, we would end up with a better product. So from the very beginning, we've had a very participatory approach to developing the program. And so following along that's our homepage, and following along those boxes on the bottom, the actual kind of flow of participation is that people join field missions, which are research questions that are posed by members of the community, might be students, teachers, or scientists. They map and share the species observations that they make in their own community and share those publicly on the website. And then they make meaning of the data in the context of the larger Vital Signs database. And then with the pictures and the videos that they collected out in the field, they can make media-rich projects that communicate their conclusions, and they again post those as part of on the website as part of that that documentation of what we're learning. And scientists are also engaging online with this community to check the observations, to check the identifications. They can confirm them or question them. They can also leave notes and actually have conversations and ask questions of the participants and share stories. Anyone can actually comment on anything. And the scientists are actually using this data that is collected to inform their own research, which is really important. And that's possible because we included scientists and teachers from the beginning in the design of the project. So this is a very different learning environment than many teachers are used to. So it really required a different approach to professional development because we really needed them to get on board with this new way of teaching and learning. So in order for students to participate productively in this learning environment, we need to actually get teachers comfortable with what the learning environment is and give them experiences that them feel comfortable first, because if they're not comfortable with it, they can't help their students to be comfortable and participate easily. So in designing our professional development, that was really our approach, and we developed out of our participation in this working group. We've come to recognize the design principles that underlie our professional development approach, but this was just kind of the way that we went about it that made sense, and we take a very iterative approach and a continuous improvement approach to working with teachers. So we watch and see what works, and we do a professional development. We see, what's the participation of those teachers, and then we shift it up accordingly. So the design principles that we, looking back, recognized in what we've done, there are 6 of them that we're going to share with you. So the first one is modeling the participatory learning environment and giving teachers the kind of experience in professional development that we hope they then give their students in the classroom or outside. So really giving them a firsthand experience of what it's like to participate in the program themselves. Our second principle is building community and long-term support. And we found that teachers began to really trust us, and our relationship with them deepens, and they get deeper and deeper into the opportunities in the vital signs community. And they also work with one another. So we bring teachers back and have them participate in the professional development institutes as teacher mentors. So we're really trying to build relationships both between us and teachers, but also among teachers and between teachers and scientists within the community, and students and teachers and scientists. So we also, the third principle is creating common confidence-building experiences. And this often looks like a pre-institute assignment that we have the teachers actually go out, or the educators go out and make an observation and publish it on their own to prove that they can do it without us. And to also create a common experience so when they get into the teacher institute with us, the educator institute, they have something that they can immediately share with other participants. The fourth design principle is that we make an enormous effort to stay relevant to the education landscape in Maine. And that is to the standards that teachers are addressing in their classrooms, to political conversations that are happening, to understanding all of the pressures that are impacting the teachers' practice in the classroom. Because if we aren't helping the teachers where the teachers are, our offerings are irrelevant to them. So we need to really serve them where they are. So our fifth design principle connected to the last one a little bit, but we take it upon ourselves to stay current as possible with research on how best to teach and learn science, and bring that to the teachers in Maine as part of our professional development, and really stay current and help them stay current with what research is telling us really works. And then the sixth principle is that one that I've already mentioned, which is this notion of continuous improvement. So we keep what works in one institute and we use that again, but we iterate and iterate and iterate to keep it fresh and build off the things that we've seen work. So it was really wonderful to be part of this working group because it gave us a chance to stop and look at really what are we doing and derive these design principles from what we've been doing. And these principles and the ones that we developed as a working group are going to guide our evolution as we move forward. But we are practitioners. We're working pretty hard on the ground and don't have a lot of chance to kind of pick up our heads and look at what we're doing. So having had that opportunity and being able to articulate our design principles and the ones of the whole working group has been really powerful. Thanks. Oh, and here, if you didn't know, is our website address.
Thank you so much. Laurel?
Laurel, are you on mute?
Hello. It took me a moment to unmute my microphone. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to speak. I'm just going to give a very brief few sentences about our case study. I encourage you all to read it. But in terms of the key takeaways, I believe that my colleague Erin did a really good job of speaking about the principles of participatory learning environments, which we explored in our publication. What we did was begin by working with students, which we only briefly alluded to in this chapter. And in addition to exploring digital literacy with them, we asked them a bit about what they wished that their teachers knew. And we used their process in our program as we figured out how to do participatory learning, as well as some of their input on that specific question to design a few participatory professional development programs. The first was a 5-day, full-day summer workshop with teachers in the Los Angeles Unified School District. And we had 9 educators in our first week.
Oh, what happened?
Oh no.
Did we lose Laurel?
I think so.
Is she
Okay.
right there with you, Ioana?
No, she went to another room because of the echoing sound.
So there's a chance that she might be able to circle back on, but we can kind of continue forward, and if she comes back, she can resume where she left off. So this is great, and maybe this gives us an opportunity to kind of shift towards a conversation and maybe to think out loud about some of the questions and challenges that teachers, educators might face in terms of trying to do some of this work. So let me just say
Sounds
what
good.
I find a lot of things striking about this work that you're sharing, and particularly the emphasis on teachers, because as we talk about rethinking learning, rethinking the learning environment, 21st century innovation, all of these things that are now a part of a broader kind of global conversation around what it means to engage young learners today. We oftentimes overlook the centrality of teachers and the fact that teachers too are learners, and that teachers too are adapting to this kind of shifting landscape that we find ourselves in. So maybe Erin, you and some of the others from the team could perhaps think about teachers and teachers looking in on this particular chat, this conversation, educators, administrators. What would you identify as perhaps some of the more immediate challenges that schools and educators might face in terms of really trying to build an environment where this type of professional development can take place?
Sure. I would say, the first thing with teachers, and this is actually what really sparked the entire research and working group that we put together, is that when we initially started releasing our new media literacies material, our curriculum that we had developed to explore and practice the skills, we found that when it was started to be implemented, it fell flat because the participation gap that we had referenced in the initial white paper back in 2006 about confronting the challenges of participatory culture, we found that we had spoken about this participation gap in relation to youth, and that teachers, the participation gap was just as equivalent to teachers as it was to kids, and that there was a real important need for giving these type of environments and these type of processes and curriculum practices to teachers, and they wanted it, and they wanted to be able to really engage in thinking about how they create their curriculum to be more participatory. And so the principles that are laid out in this publication very much speak directly to teachers as they think about developing their curriculum for the day, and as they think about when they grab curriculum from, say, an outside vendor or person who's developed professional development around a specific book. Every teacher that takes those books remixes them immediately because they know their students best. They know what's going to work well in their environment. And we're encouraging them in kind of thinking about these design principles, how to engage in it, how to model it, model the type of new skills and practices for the students. So instead of just telling them or talking about what the students should do, the best way for students to actually get it themselves is to model it. And I think that what the two Sarahs were talking about with vital signs really struck a chord with where I think teachers are, is one, if you get them to model it when they're doing their professional development, get them playing, get them trying the activities that we give them to give to students, that helps. And then have them, those that become more, they start, think of mimiitos. We hang around, we mess around, and we geek out. When teachers start leveling up and start thinking about new ways of engaging, they can come back as mentors and create kind of this peer community. We've seen it in vital signs, we've seen it in our own work at Play, we've seen it in Scratch. If Karen Brennan was here, who developed the Scratch Ed community, she would be saying the same thing. It's about letting teachers teach teachers. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah,
Sure. Go ahead.
just one thing that I would say briefly is that I think in your question, John, you were asking about how do we create an environment where teachers can have professional development like this. And we very deliberately hold all of our professional developments here at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, which is a working research facility, and bring teachers away from their own communities, because one of the things we've observed is that they really like to be in a different environment, and we create a really safe place for them to play. And I think when you're learning something new, it can often help to be in a whole new environment, because you're not kind of in the space where you are doing the same thing that you've always done. You're in a very new place, which opens up the possibility of playing and trying and being in a kind of more exploratory frame of mind.
Laurel, I know we lost you there for a few minutes. Welcome back. Did you want to mention maybe what you think is a main or kind of critical takeaway from the case study that you conducted, just so that we can have that as part of the fabric of our conversation here?
Thank you. I love that opportunity. It's so ironic. I was with you the whole time I was listening, and then, you know, I step out on the stage and the lights go out. Well, I'm thinking about what would be most important to add to the conversation at this time, because I do want to be able to just have an exchange. I think that what was really valuable was the opportunity to offer a different format of professional development. We were reacting specifically to criticisms of the drive-by model of PD, where they're in, they're out, and it's sort of in one ear and out the other, or some of the principles and lessons that teachers appreciated from a PD experience remain in their heads, but they're not sure exactly how to manifest it in their classroom, and they barely have a moment to breathe, let alone try something new. Often as well, in terms of process, they don't necessarily feel supported in experimentation, and the stakes are really high, and I feel like very critical eyes have been trained on teachers lately, so that if there's any kind of misstep, they're subject to a pink slip. So it's a difficult place for teachers to be in. Recognizing that, we offered a program in which we worked one-on-one with teachers throughout the first semester of last year, so that what we talked about for a really rich week could be scaffolded and implemented in actual practice. And we also encourage them to feel more safe in experimentation. We can't control the powers that be and whether pink slips are distributed, but we can help them feel a little bit more empowered to make small, not radical, but important moves to innovate. Thank you. I'm glad I was able to talk.
That's a great point that you made, Laurel. I would add one tiny thing, that I think in that high stakes environment, teachers are even more inclined to listen to each other. And that's one thing that's really important, is to bring teachers together, as Erin said, to learn from each other, because they share things that they've proven works in their classroom. And that can be a really useful strategy.
You know, a lot of the schools that we've had a chance to visit here and work with, and where I'm located in the Central Texas, Austin area, you know, schools that are oftentimes strapped for resources, strapped for time, things that you have alluded to. What would you say to those schools and those educators who, you know, may not have sufficient room in their budgets, you know, maybe lacking in other kinds of resources? You know, what of value still exists in terms of the report that you produced, the research that you've done, the kind of design principles that you've laid out that could be equitably distributed, no matter what kinds of resources, financial or otherwise, schools may or may not have access to?
I think it's about building the community, which was one of the design principles that the working group came out. You know, even without a lot of financial support, building a community can then have the teachers introduce new resources or free resources that are on the web to each other. You know, and it's about not offering just a one way to build community, but offer multiple ways to kind of engage the whole teacher. So some of them them are, just starting with like some face-to-face and face-to-face gatherings are really important. I know that one of the schools that we are observing here in the Los Angeles area has pupil-free days. So they really make a concerted effort to offer days where teachers can go in and kind of teach each other. But you don't want to create, one of the things that teachers said to us is, how can I be part of a community? I'm already swamped and overstretched with what I'm asked to do for my job, and for in class. So beyond just building it outside of those spaces, administrators and professional development people should think about how they can cooperate within school time. So this school that we've been observing actually has teachers. They really pay for they pay for substitute teachers to come in, or they also have said, oh, well, these two classes can come together and the teacher will just have a bigger group in order for this teacher to go and observe another class during her school day, and then they can have kind of through observation, they can have deeper discussions, during their, weekly meetings as to what's working and what's not working in a classroom.
Interesting.
And I think that especially in circumstances like this, when resources are limited, sustainability becomes a crucial issue, because usually sustainability is a problem when there is a concern about resources. And that's our final design principle, is that PD really must be sustainable, and we must start thinking about short-term versus long-term investments in PD, which is related to what Laurel was saying before about the drive-by PD and the dangers associated with it.
The other thing that I'd mention is creating partnerships with organizations outside of the schools that can really support the schools, whether those are informal science education resources like a local science museum, or a not-for-profit like us, a research institute, and creating a long-term partnership between the schools and that other organization that perhaps can compete for grants to support it can also be a really important tool. That's the model that we follow.
I like that. I think that's
I think that really helps to keep it relevant. It helps to build the larger learning ecosystem in their local community and create relevance, because the people outside of those schools are kind of, they can sometimes be forward thinking for a teacher as to like, oh, this is what my kids are doing outside of classroom. How can I then incorporate it into, say, my science class?
I think that some of this also speaks to not only social processes, as Erin mentioned, very important, that community building, but it also has to do a little bit with focusing inward, a little bit about self-actualization. So challenging students to think about what they want to learn, challenging teachers to identify some assets to maximize. And that doesn't really take any resource except time, which of course is precious, but ultimately makes the context more robust and I think supports sustainability.
I'm just curious. So this morning, I think it was this morning in the New York Times, there's an article about two recent surveys that are coming out, I think within the next few days or so, one from Pew and the other from Common Sense Media, two of my sort of real favorite resources for, just learning about how this landscape and environment is changing. But the two studies apparently based on surveys of teachers. And teachers kind of articulating concern and frustration about whether or not technology is leading to shorter attention spans amongst their students, the extent to which technology is a distraction. So again, this kind of concern and angst about how technology and the integration of technology into the various kind of learning ecologies that students inhabit kind of diminishes the quality of that ecology. And I'm wondering, how your work might respond to some of those kinds of conclusions, and certainly how the larger media might pick up that narrative, and how might teachers think about participatory learning, think about the kind of design principles that they bring into the classroom that more adequately, more forcefully deal with these sometimes genuine concerns about technologies, kind of some of the ways in which technology can distract from learning, but also understanding the ways in which technology can be a very powerful lever in terms of creating and approaching new models for learning.
Such a great question, Craig. Thank you.
Great question.
If I may just jump in,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about the metaphor of diet. And I feel like some of the criticisms that you made, people could also say about food or about dessert. Dessert is making us fat. Dessert is making us jumpy. And that's true if the dessert that we're talking about is super fatty chocolate bar, but it's false if the dessert that we're talking about is berries and cream. And there could be a time and a place for a super fatty chocolate bar if it's for a special occasion once every 3 months. So I think that it's a question of choosing the appropriate resource, in terms of dessert or in terms of technology. And I think it's also about portion control. So some technology that are out there might be detrimental to attention spans, and they're flashing in kids' eyes and creating sort of a culture of stimulation dependency. And others might be more positive, just like berries are great for free radicals. So there's that consideration, and there's also being really deliberate about the best times to introduce high quality products and when it would better serve you to have a more analog experience. So
I want to build on your metaphor, Laurel.
Oh, please do.
So whether it's a healthy dessert or a super fat chocolatey dessert, if you're only sitting on your derriere, then, whether it's high, they're both high in sugar, just one sugar is better than the S. So, you can't think of, technology equals dessert in just on its own. It's about like, are they moving around? Are they getting up? Are they being active? And I would say that we saw this with teachers when they came into a summer sandbox, our professional development workshop. They immediately thought that we were going to teach them a new technology and show them all the different types of technologies. And we had to it took us the first full day to really get them to kind of shift or longer. I think it might have taken all 5 days that we had with them to really shift the conversation and their mindset to be like, oh, you're not going to give me the tool. You're going to give me some new ways of looking at tools, and I can choose which one is going to be best for my group. So it's never it's not, this is not siloed. Dessert and physical fitness go hand in hand just as much as technology and the practices that it can enable go hand in hand.
That's
and
right.
I think that we need to really shift the conversation in professional development from being what we did for over 10 years with education technology, where all these outside sources came in and taught a tool, to really being more about how we're communicating, how we're learning, how we're engaging through the technology. Just like we're saying, it's not designing for, but designing with.
Yeah, I agree. It's less the grapefruit diet, more nutrition and wellness.
And we might just move entirely away from the food analogies and think about technology. Oh, come on, Laurel. But thinking about technology as a book. I mean, when books first came out, people thought, oh no, this is going to be the downfall of civilization. No one's going to be able to, or no one's going to have the mental discipline to memorize things, which was the heart and soul of how stories moved around. And people can write perfectly dreadful things in books that could be very harmful to young people. But there's a lot of incredible literature and incredible books and knowledge that's enclosed in those. So technology is kind of the same thing. And if in a participatory environment, you can help teachers or educators see how they can actually make use of that opportunity, that communication tool, to accomplish something that they want for their students, it's a very empowering, positive experience. So in our case, we often get calls from teachers who want a scientist to come and give a guest talk in one of their classes. And that, sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't work. Some scientists are much better at communicating with middle school students than others. You never know. But we know that teachers want to connect their students with scientists. So you can figure out ways to scaffold that in context in which that's really appropriate and positive for all parties. And using technology, you can make it happen. So it's all about what you're doing with it.
Yeah.
And I love the food analogy.
Yeah, no, that's great, and these are great responses, and I'm sure there will be some really interesting conversations in response to these two surveys when they come out.
Yeah, I would just say, Craig, this is something that we're actually putting in our next publication, and what we've talked about is, what if when referring to learning, we make a concerted effort to replace the term technology with media, because media is the communication of it.
Absolutely. So we're getting close to the end of our hour here. It's amazing how quickly time flies by when you're having fun. And I wanted to make sure that we gave everyone a chance to share just maybe a brief final thought. And maybe we start with the Sarahs and then work our way towards Erin across our screen.
Well, I don't really have a whole lot to add. Maybe Sarah does. But it was great fun to be part of this conversation. I'm glad we all figured out our media issues so we could take part.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, and I'm so grateful that the Sarahs were able to tune in despite Hurricane Sandy, and all my best goes out to, hey you, to survivors of the storm out on the East Coast. Our thoughts are with you. I want to promote the aforementioned publications that Erin kind of dangled in front of us. Evidently, they'll be available next week, perhaps as early as Monday, November 5th. So look out for that.
And maybe you could just say, Erin, where people can find the Designing with Teachers report?
Sure. There's two places you can find the Designing with Teachers report. One is at annenberginnovationlab.com, and then it's right on the homepage. And then also we've posted it on the DML Connected Learning Hub. Oh, annenberglab.com. Yeah, I don't even know my own website. annenberglab.com. And then the other one is on the DML Hub. We've posted it there with the working group. And I just want to say that this working group was so much fun. It was such a diverse group. So, when we came together twice, there was really interesting, deep conversations with a very diverse group of perspectives that really helped kind of whittle down as to like what really is important when we think about participatory models of professional development. And I just want to say we're hopefully taking this on the road because we've submitted this as a panel for the upcoming DML conference. So fingers crossed. Hint, hint, Craig.
Well, no, I'm sure this will be a fantastic aspect of the program. So certainly looking forward to this conversation continuing possibly there and elsewhere as well.
Okay.
So let me just say thank you to you, Erin, and to Ioana, who had to leave for a class I think she's teaching. Ioana, I'm sorry. And let me also just say to our guest and those who may be watching later, that to keep today's conversation going, we encourage you to continue using the Twitter hashtag Connected Learning and posting in the comments section of this webinar's page in the archive section of www.connectedlearning.tv. On that same web page later today, we'll have a full recording of this webinar, a link to the publication that was referenced today, so you'll be able to find it there as well, or from there, and other curated content. Before we sign off, let me just announce that our next Connected Learning webinar will be a special Election Day webinar on Tuesday, November 6th, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, with Professor Joe Kahn, who's done a lot of important work in terms of looking at youth, digital media, and civic engagement. And Joe will be on connectedlearning.tv talking about youth involvement in the 2012 election. And obviously that's going to be very important and a big subject both next week, Election Day Tuesday, and certainly even beyond as we think about democratic futures. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and thanks to our guests and our Hangout members for a fantastic conversation, and I think an important one as it relates to empowering our teachers to be effective instruments of learning in the classroom. Have a good day.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, y'all.